Show it to me. You'll never find that because that phrase was never used before that moment in that practice before I think game 3 of that series. And so that's when the term first started. Now, in terms of Del Harris, he used Robert Reed, a great 6'7" forward, as his ball handler initiator when he had Calvin Murphy on one wing and Mike Newland and these other great shooting guards coming off of screens.
At 70 years old now, Marques Johnson is done playing nice. After a Hall of Fame career watching other players get the credit and respect he deserved, he is finally letting it all out. He has a list of 6 NBA players he hated, not disliked, hated. Real, deep, personal hatred born from insecurity, rejection, displacement, unfairness, and ego clashes that defined his entire career. He was That is how raw and honest his feelings were about some of these guys. For decades, Marques kept this inside. He played the game, made his all-star teams, invented the point forward position, became one of the most creative scorers in NBA history, and kept his mouth shut. But now he wants people to understand what it really felt like to compete in the golden age, when the league was a war. Every game was psychological battle. Every opponent wanted to destroy you. These 6 men got under his skin the deepest. If you want more stories like this, hit the hype feature and give this video some hype. Stories about the real psychology of greatness, about the rivalries that shaped legends, do not get told enough. Show us some love with the hype feature and let us know you want more about these incredible athletes and the pain that made them. The thing about the golden age of basketball is that nobody talks about the darkness. People remember Magic and Bird lighting up the finals. People remember Michael Jordan soaring through the air. People remember the highlight reels and the championships and the moments that defined an era. But they do not remember the quiet resentment, the slow burning jealousy, the nights when players went home thinking about the guy who blocked their shot, took their credit, or disrespected them. They do not talk about how personal it all was, how every loss felt like a referendum on your worth as a human being, not just as a player. Marques Johnson lived in that darkness. He was too good to be ignored, but not quite good enough to fully dominate. He was efficient, but not flashy. He was creative, but not celebrated. He was everything you needed on a basketball team, but not what the world wanted to see. And the 6 men on his hate list represented every way that darkness manifested. Every rejection, every injustice, every moment when the world told him he was not enough. So let us start with the list. We are going backwards through his entire career, starting with the moment that gave him closure. The moment when the greatest player of all time admitted something Marques Johnson had waited 40 years to hear. That is where this story truly ends. Number 1, Michael Jordan and the Space Jam validation. In the early 1980s, Marques Johnson was the face of Adidas. He was the prototype for what a modern NBA wing could be. A young kid named Michael Jordan was watching, idolizing. Jordan was at UNC, dreaming about what he would become. The poster on his dorm room wall told the story. It was Marques Johnson rising for a dunk. Johnson's law, what goes up must go in. That was what Jordan aspired to be. Jordan wanted to sign with Adidas because of Marques Johnson. By 1995, everything was different. Jordan was the greatest player on the planet. He had 3 rings. He was filming Space Jam, built the Jordan Dome to train, and invited all the best talent to scrimmage. Marques, 39 and retired, was on set as a cast member. One day during a scrimmage, Marques managed to throw down a dunk. Jordan's competitive brain snapped on. He could not let the old guy outperform him. He barked, "Hey, old man, don't be trying to dunk. That wasn't part of your game." Marques did not flinch. He looked Jordan in the eye and said, "Man, whatever I was doing, you had my poster on your wall in college. So I was doing something right." Jordan paused. He blushed, something that almost never happened. He was not used to losing verbal battles. But he knew the truth. He said, "You right. You right about that. I loved your game. I love your game in college." This moment became the validation Marques had waited for his entire career. The greatest player of all time was admitting that Marques had been his blueprint. This rivalry, if you can call it that, ended with respect. It ended with acknowledgement. It ended with closure. The Last Dance documentary later confirmed it. There was the Marques Johnson poster on Jordan's college wall. Proof, evidence, validation. After being blocked by Wilkes, frozen out by Kareem, displaced by Moncrief, underrated by Erving, and tormented by Bird, Marques finally heard the words he needed. Number 2, Larry Bird and the futility of control. Larry Bird was different from Michael Jordan. Jordan was greatness that surpassed everyone through pure superiority. But Bird was psychological warfare. Bird was calculated precision. Bird did not just say what he would do. He told you exactly how, when, and where. Then he did it. There was a specific moment that burned into Marcus's memory forever. Bird told him, "I am going to go shoot this motherfucking jumper in your face right there in that corner. And it is going to be your Christmas present." Marcus heard it. He knew it was coming. He probably adjusted his defense. And it did not matter. Not one bit. Bird went exactly where he said. He took exactly the shot he promised. And it went in, just like he promised. For a defender of Marcus's caliber, this was not just a loss. This was psychological collapse. It stripped him of his agency. No matter what he did, no matter how hard he played, the outcome had already been decided. Bird had seen the future. Bird controlled the future. Marcus was just a passenger. That helplessness curdled into loathing. But it got worse. Marcus decided to get physical. Maybe he could throw Bird off rhythm by playing rough. It did not work. It backfired. During one game, when Marcus was playing physical defense, Bird did not complain to Marcus. He just turned to referee Jess Kersey, whom Bird called Red with familiar intimacy. "Red, Red, get him off me, get him off me." Kersey immediately blew his whistle. 2 touch fouls on Marques. Marques looked in disbelief. He realized that Bird controlled the officiating. The playing field was not level. It never would be. Bird was not just playing. Bird was controlling the entire environment. This was the hatred of helplessness. This was realizing that no matter how good you are, there are forces you cannot control. Bird forced Marques to confront his own limitations. It was almost unbearable. The depth of Marques's pain reached a breaking point. After one brutal loss where Bird had destroyed him psychologically, Marques went to his hotel room and wrote a poem. This is not something most NBA players would do. But Marques was an intellectual. He was thoughtful. He needed to process his emotions in a different way. The poem said, "Rule of thumb is to act real dumb and pretend there's nothing wrong. But if your senses are real, your mind's intact, it's hard to go along. It's out of my hands. Acquiesce to someone's demands. 'Cause only when the scale is grand do you find out who's really who." This poem was a window into his soul. It was an admission of vulnerability. It was Marques saying, "Bird has beaten me so thoroughly that I cannot even control my own emotions anymore. I am at his mercy, and I hate it." But there was also something else. The beginning of acceptance. Sometimes you face a force greater than yourself. The race element added another layer. The narrative around Bird was the Great White Hope. After hitting a game winner against the Bucks, Bird yelled at the Milwaukee bench, "You can't put another white boy on me. I'm the coldest white boy in the league. You better put a brother on me." It was trash talk that used race as a weapon, and Marcus's response was grudging respect. He admitted he was right. He will forever be the coldest white guy to ever play the sport. The hatred transformed into awe. Bird was simply undeniable. Number 3. Julius Erving and the media that would not listen. Julius Erving was not a psychological tormentor like Bird. He was something different. He was the guy who got the credit that Marques believed belonged to him. He was the guy who the media loved more. He was the guy who was cooler, more marketable, more exciting. He was the guy who played the sport the way the masses wanted it played, with dunks and highlight reels and style over substance. And that drove Marques Johnson absolutely insane. Marques was a fundamentalist. He believed in efficiency. He believed in making the right play. He believed in points per shot. He believed in doing things the smart way, not the flashy way. But the world does not reward the smart way. The world rewards the exciting way. The world rewards the dunk over the jump shot. And that gap between what Marques believed he deserved and what he actually received became the source of deep, simmering resentment. The crux of it all happened in the 1978-79 season. Marques had an absolutely incredible year. He averaged 25.6 points per game. He shot 55% from the field. He had 7.6 rebounds per game. He had 3.0 assists per game. He was efficient. He was dominant. He was everything a basketball player should be. When the All-NBA selections were announced, Marques was selected for the first team. Erving was also selected for the first team. So on paper, they were equals. They were both recognized as the best players in the league. But that is not how it felt to Marques. The conversation around the selections was all about whether Erving should have been the first pick. The media was saying that the selections were close, that it could have gone either way, that Erving was the real star. Marcus had put up better numbers. Marcus had been more efficient. Marcus had done everything better from a pure basketball standpoint. But Erving was cooler. Erving was the high-flying icon who had legitimized the ABA and the slam dunk as an art form. Erving was the face of the league, and that counted for something in a way that Marques's statistics never could. So Marcus took immense combative pride in beating Erving for that spot. He felt like he had to constantly prove that he was the superior basketball player, even if Erving was the superior star. This became a rivalry where Marques was always trying to out-argue people to make them see what he saw, that he was better, that he was more deserving, that the media was wrong about Erving. This rivalry came to a head in 1981 during the Eastern Conference semifinals. It was a 7-game war between the Bucks and the 76ers. In Game 2, Erving had a terrible game. He scored only 18 points on poor shooting. He was inefficient. He looked human. When the media rushed to interview Marques after the game, they asked him the obvious question. Did you finally find the formula to stop Dr. J? Marques had a chance. He had a chance to gloat. He had a chance to say, yes, we shut him down. We won. We proved that he is not as great as everyone thinks. But that is not what he said. Instead, he said something that sounds generous on the surface, but was actually deeply dismissive. Heck, no one should walk around and say they stopped Erving. The difference was that Sunday they went in, and tonight they rimmed the basket and went out. On the surface, it sounds like Marques is giving Erving credit. Like he is saying, it is not about defense. It is just about whether shots fall. But what Marques was really saying was this. Erving is just another player who misses shots. He is not a god. He is not supernatural. He is just a guy who got lucky some nights and unlucky other nights. It was a refusal to grant Erving the mystique that everyone else granted him. It was Marques saying, I see through this. I see that he is just a human being playing basketball, and the media has convinced everyone that he is something more. But in doing so, Marques revealed his own insecurity. He was bothered by the idea that Erving could miss shots and still be graded on a curve, that his failures were attributed to bad luck and his successes to destiny. Marques wanted to be great in the way that Bird was great, in the way that Jordan would be great. He wanted to be undeniable. But he was always going to be the guy that people debated about, that people questioned, that people compared to others. The hatred of Erving was the hatred of injustice. It was the anger at a system that valued style over substance. It was the resentment of a player who knew he was better, but could never convince the world of it because the world did not want to be convinced. The world wanted the dunk. The world wanted the highlight reel. The world wanted Julius Erving. And Marques Johnson could score 25 points on 55% shooting all season long, and it still would not be enough. This is the kind of hatred that eats at you for decades. It is not the kind that fades with time because the injustice never goes away. The All-NBA spot could have gone either way. The narrative could have celebrated Marques's efficiency instead of doubting it. The media could have acknowledged that he was doing more with less, that he was the smarter player, the more fundamental player, but they did not. And so Marques carried this resentment through his entire career. Every time he saw Erving get praised, every time he saw the highlight reel dunks replayed, every time the media chose style over substance, it was another cut. Another confirmation that the game did not work the way it should. That excellence was not rewarded fairly. That sometimes it did not matter how good you were if you were not the kind of good that people wanted to watch. Number 4. Sidney Moncrief and the loss of the throne. If the rivalries with Erving and Bird were about external forces, about media narratives and official decisions, then the rivalry with Sidney Moncrief was internal. It was about the person who shared Marques's locker room. It was about a teammate. And that made it so much worse because it revealed something about Marques that he probably did not want to admit about himself. It revealed that he was jealous. It revealed that he cared about his own status more than he cared about his team winning. It revealed that he was petty. It revealed that he could not handle being second. From 1977 through 1980, Marques Johnson was the undisputed franchise player for the Milwaukee Bucks. He was the primary scorer. He was the face of the team on the ticket stubs and the posters in the arena. He was the engine of Coach Don Nelson's offense. He was an MVP candidate. He was the sun, and the entire Bucks organization orbited around him. This was his team. This was his time. This was his legacy in the making. He owned Milwaukee. Then Sidney Moncrief arrived, drafted in 1979. Moncrief was a different kind of player than Marques. Moncrief was relentless. Moncrief was high motor. Moncrief was defense first. Moncrief was the consummate professional and the darling of basketball purists. Moncrief was humble. Moncrief was the model citizen, everything that Marques was not, or everything that Marques did not want to be. Moncrief was the anti-Marques. By the 1981-82 season, something shifted. Don Nelson, an innovator who was always tweaking his system, began designing more plays for Moncrief. The offensive focus shifted. The ball movement changed. The team began to run the offense through to Moncrief instead of through Marques, and Marques was asked to do something he did not want to do. He was asked to take a secondary scoring role. He was asked to facilitate more. He was asked to shoot less. He was asked to defer to the younger guard. For Marques Johnson, this was a profound insult. He was in his prime. He believed he was a top 5 talent in the league. And now he was being told that his role was shrinking, that his importance was diminishing, that the young guy was the future. This was not about basketball. This was about ego. This was about status. This was about who owned the franchise. And Marques was losing the fight for ownership. The hatred grew more intense when Marques realized that Moncrief was not just ascending, but that he was becoming the darling of the media narrative. Moncrief was the hard-working guy. Moncrief was the defensive specialist. Moncrief was winning Defensive Player of the Year awards. Moncrief was getting MVP votes. The narrative was shifting from Marques Johnson's Bucks to Sidney Moncrief's Bucks. And Marques could not do anything about it, because Moncrief was actually excellent. He could not even really complain because the stats showed that they were winning. They were averaging over 50 wins a season. They were reaching Eastern Conference Finals. The team was good, but the resentment was real. It was the resentment of a guy who felt like his contributions were being undervalued, like his efficiency, his rebounding, his passing, all of it was being ignored because there was a shiny new object in Moncrief's defense and tenacity. In the 1979-80 season, Marques averaged 21.7 points, and Moncrief averaged 8.5 as a rookie. Johnson owned the team. By 1980-81, Moncrief was up to 14.0 points. Marques dipped to 20.3. The shift was beginning, but the flip, the real flip, came in 1981-82. That season, Moncrief averaged 19.8 points, and Marques dropped to 16.5. For the first time, Moncrief was the leading scorer. Marques was second fiddle. By 1982-83, Moncrief was at 22.5, and Marques was at 21.4. Moncrief had won. He had taken the throne, and Marques had to sit there and watch it happen every single day, in the same locker room, every practice, every game, every moment. The hatred of Moncrief was the hatred of displacement. It was not the hatred of an enemy. It was the hatred of being replaced by someone you have to share a locker room with. It was the hatred of professional jealousy boiling over in silence, game after game, season after season. It was the hatred of watching your star fade while someone else's rises. And it only ended when Marques was traded to the Clippers in 1984. Finally, he did not have to watch Moncrief wear the Bucks uniform. Finally, he did not have to be reminded every day that he had lost his throne. What made the Moncrief rivalry different was that it was purely internal conflict. With Wilkes, Bird, Kareem, Jordan, and Erving, Marques could blame external circumstances. He could blame the coaches, the media, the referees. But with Moncrief, there was no one to blame but himself. Moncrief was younger. Moncrief was hungrier. Moncrief was ascending while Marques declined. There was no mystery to it. The old guard gets replaced by the new. And sometimes you are on the wrong side of that transition. Number 5, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and the idol that rejected you. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was different from all the others. With Wilkes, it was about insecurity. With Moncrief, it was about displacement. With Erving, it was about media bias. With Bird, it was about psychological torture. But with Kareem, it was about something more primal. It was about the pain of loving someone and being rejected by them. It was about idolizing a god and having that god look at you with complete indifference. It was the most personal pain of all. Marques Johnson grew up idolizing Lou Alcindor, who later became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. As a young kid in Los Angeles, Marques saw Alcindor and thought, that is what I want to be. That is the template. That is the blueprint for perfection. Kareem was a UCLA legend. He had conquered the NBA. He was the ultimate representation of what basketball excellence could look like. For Marques, he was a hero. He was someone to look up to. He was someone to study. He was someone to become. He was the ceiling for what Marques could achieve. When Marques was drafted by the Milwaukee Bucks in 1977, he was stepping directly into the vacuum left by Kareem's departure. Kareem had left Milwaukee 2 years earlier, and his acrimonious exit created all kinds of tension. But Marques saw an opportunity. He was stepping into the same franchise where his hero had played. He was following in the same footsteps. Maybe Marques thought he could have a conversation with Kareem. Maybe they could connect. Maybe Marques could ask Kareem for guidance. Maybe they could become something like mentor and student. Maybe they could build a relationship rooted in the shared UCLA experience. Maybe Kareem would see himself in Marques and offer some wisdom, some connection, some acknowledgement that he mattered. Instead, Marques encountered a wall. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was cold. He was distant. He was aloof. Marques, who was charismatic and media-friendly and open, came up against a personality that was the exact opposite. Kareem did not smile. Kareem did not make small talk. Kareem did not acknowledge people. If you walked past Kareem on the street and said hello, he would walk right past you. If you tried to have a conversation with him, he would look through you. He would treat you like you were not even there. And this was not just something that happened occasionally. This was his entire demeanor. This was who he was. Year after year, season after season, same cold silence. Players described Kareem as sounding more like a chemistry professor than an NBA player. He maintained a stoic, intellectual distance that many people interpreted as arrogance. Some people thought he was a jerk. Some people thought he did not care about other human beings. But what they were really seeing was a man who had built a wall around himself. Kareem had experienced the weight of being America's most famous black athlete in an era where that came with a lot of baggage. He had been scrutinized. He had been racialized. He had been commodified by the media since he was a teenager in New York. His aloofness was not rudeness. It was survival. It was a protective shell built to withstand a hostile world. But Marques did not understand this. Marques only knew that the guy he idolized would not even look at him. The guy he wanted to connect with treated him like he was invisible. Marques took it personally. He interpreted Kareem's protective silence as personal antipathy. He thought, I am not good enough for him. I am not worthy of his time. He does not think I belong in the same league as him. Every time he saw Kareem and got no acknowledgement, it was another cut, another rejection, another reminder that the man he worshipped did not even see him. The hatred that Marques felt toward Kareem was the hatred of rejection. It was the pain of offering your admiration and having it thrown back in your face. It was the bitterness of a fan being ignored by his hero. It fueled a competitive fire in Marques to topple the idol who would not acknowledge him, to prove that he was good enough, to prove that he belonged, to prove that he could compete at the same level as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, whether Kareem noticed or not. The hatred was Marques trying to prove that Kareem was wrong to ignore him. It was only decades later that Marques came to understand what was really going on. Through conversations with Marques Johnson and other players, Marques eventually learned that Kareem's coldness was not about him. It was about Kareem's migraines. It was about Kareem's deep mistrust of the public sphere. It was about Kareem carrying the weight of the civil rights era and the Vietnam War, and decades of being treated as a symbol rather than a person. But during their playing days, all Marques knew was that the greatest player he had ever idolized would not even say hello to him, and that hurt in a way that was almost impossible to describe. Number 6. Jamal Wilkes and the Tears That Built a Legend. And we come back to the beginning, to UCLA, to 1973, to a gymnasium in Westwood where a young prodigy named Marques Johnson arrived with all the confidence in the world and left questioning his own existence as a basketball player. This is truly where it all started. Marques Johnson was the Los Angeles City Section 4 A Division Player of the Year. He was 6 feet 7 inches tall. He was a phenom. He had dominated his peers his entire life. He had never known failure. He had never been blocked by someone better. He had never been made to look foolish on a basketball court. He walked into UCLA expecting to compete for a starting spot. He walked into UCLA expecting to be the future of the Bruins. He walked into UCLA expecting to continue the dominance he had known his entire life. Instead, he encountered Jamal "Silk" Wilkes. Wilkes was a senior. Wilkes was a consensus All-American. Wilkes played for John Wooden, the greatest coach in the history of basketball. Wilkes was efficient. Wilkes was long. Wilkes was skilled. And Wilkes had absolutely no interest in making Marques Johnson feel good about himself. During Marques's first week of practice, something shocking happened. Wilkes proceeded to block virtually every shot that Marques attempted. This was not a competitive loss. This was not Marques just having a bad day. This was a systematic deconstruction of Marques's entire identity as a scorer. Everything he had ever believed about himself, every ounce of confidence he had built up over his entire basketball life, was being dismantled in real time by a senior, by a kid he had never heard of, by someone who was supposed to respect him as an incoming superstar. But there was no respect. There was just the sound of the ball being rejected, over and over again, shot after shot. Marques would go up, Wilkes would block it, Marques would try again, Wilkes would block it again. This went on for days, and with each block, Marques felt smaller. With each rejection, his confidence eroded. With each failed attempt, he questioned whether he belonged at UCLA, whether he belonged in Division I basketball, whether he was actually good at basketball at all. And then it reached a breaking point. After a particularly brutal week of practices where he could barely get a shot off, Marques went home and broke down. He wept. He cried. This is not something that many people talk about, especially not tough guys, especially not players who want to be seen as strong. But Marques Johnson at 17 or 18 years old was reduced to tears by Jamal Wilkes. He went to his parents' house and he told his father, "I can't play here. These guys are too good. I made a mistake coming to UCLA. I don't belong here." This moment is the genesis of Marques Johnson's entire career. This moment is where his competitiveness was born. This moment is where his insecurity was revealed. He hated Wilkes, not because Wilkes was a bad person. Wilkes was by all accounts a quiet, respectful teammate. He hated Wilkes because Wilkes represented everything he feared about himself. That maybe he was not as good as he thought. That maybe there were guys out there better than him. That maybe his entire identity as a basketball player was built on a false foundation. His father gave him wisdom that day. His father said that Wilkes was probably the best forward in the entire country, that surviving against him would make Marques better, that if he could learn to compete at Wilkes's level, he could compete at anyone's level. These words planted a seed that said, this pain is not a defeat, this pain is a gift, this pain is going to make you great. So Marques stuck it out, and he learned. He learned to use his body to shield the ball. He learned to embrace physical contact. He learned to rely on efficiency rather than flashiness. He learned the things that would later define his entire career as a point forward. He learned these things by being forced to adapt to Jamal Wilkes' dominance. He learned these things in tears and frustration, in the depths of his own insecurity. And when Wilkes graduated, Marques ascended. He became the star. He became the face of the Bruins. And in a gesture that spoke volumes, Marques Johnson later wore the number 54, the same number that was retired for Jamal Wilkes. He created a lineage of excellence. He acknowledged that Wilkes had not just been his rival, Wilkes had been his crucible. Wilkes had been the fire that had to burn in order to forge him into the player he became. So Marques Johnson includes Wilkes on his hate list, not because Wilkes was evil or mean, but because Wilkes forced him to confront his own insecurity. Wilkes forced him to ask himself if he was good enough, and Wilkes forced him to find the answer within himself. The hatred of Wilkes was the hatred of necessary pain. It was the hatred of a rival who had to break him down in order to build him up. And in the end, that is what all of this was about. The hatred, the insecurity, the jealousy, the resentment, the helplessness, the ego clashes. They were all part of the same story. The story of a player who never quite got the credit he deserved. A player who was always just slightly overshadowed. A player who had to constantly prove his worth against rivals who seemed to get it all so much easier. Marques Johnson's hatred for these 6 men was real. It was deep. It was rooted in psychology and pain and the brutal realities of competition at the highest level. But at the end of the day, his hatred was also the fuel that made him great. The friction between Marques and Wilkes sharpened his game. The rejection by Kareem motivated him. The displacement by Moncrief made him fight harder. The media bias surrounding Erving made him more efficient. The psychological warfare of Bird made him mentally tougher. And the eventual validation from Jordan made it all worth it. Marques Johnson is 70 years old now. He has lived a full life. He has a real legacy. He is remembered as one of the greatest to ever play the game. He made the Hall of Fame. He invented the point forward position. He changed the way basketball is played. He showed that a player could be a creator and a scorer at the same time. He proved that intelligence and efficiency could be just as valuable as flashiness and athleticism. But what matters most to him, what he needed to say at this stage of his life, was that none of it came easy. Every bit of it was earned. Every achievement was fought for. and the people he hated most often made him most human. They showed him his limitations, they forced him to grow, they made him stronger through pain. The 6 men on this list will never fully understand what they meant to Marques Johnson. They do not know how much they fueled him. They do not know how much their rejection and disrespect pushed him to become more than he thought possible. But at 70, Marques is at peace with it, or at understanding. He realizes the hate was never really about hate. It was about love. It was about caring so much that disrespect cut deeper than anything else. It was about ambition that could never be satisfied. Maybe that hunger was his greatest gift. Maybe the hatred, processed correctly, became motivation. Maybe the pain became wisdom. Now Marques can see it clearly. The 6 men were not enemies. They were teachers. They showed him what he was capable of when pushed to his limit. But Marques knows, and now at 70, he is finally telling the world,